Mom's not using her brain anymore. Let's just divide everything now while she's still breathing. My son-in-law, Derek, found that comment hilarious. That was the moment I stepped out from behind the kitchen door. The laughter died instantly. My daughter, Karen, turned the color of old milk. Derek choked on his wine. My son, Brian, who had been nodding along like a bobblehead, froze mid-sip. "Don't stop on my account," I said, steadying myself on the doorframe. "I'd love to hear more about how you're planning to divide my life's work." Nobody moved. The dining room of my own home had suddenly become a courtroom, and they were all guilty. If this story touched you, give it a like, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening from today? Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. Karen found her voice first, high and defensive. "Mom, we didn't mean it that way. We were just discussing options." "Options?" I repeated, my voice steady. "Options for what? My funeral arrangements, my nursing home, or just how to split the restaurant before the body's cold?" I looked at each of them. My daughter, Karen, whom I'd put through culinary school, only to watch her abandon her career for Derek. My son, Brian, who had repeatedly needed me to bail him out of credit card debt. And Derek, the man who had never worked a day in a kitchen, but somehow had opinions about running mine. "Dinner is canceled. Get out of my house." That night marked the true beginning of the war. It was 3 months ago. Let me tell you how a mother's silent love was repaid with the deepest betrayal. This isn't a story about a simple family argument. This is the story of a $6 million empire built on courage and resilience, almost stolen by the very children it was created for. They saw me as a frail, disposable woman, a mere obstacle between them and a massive inheritance. But they forgot one thing. I am Mei Chen, the grandmother of Bay Area Taiwanese cuisine, and I know how to fight with an unbreakable will. You need to see the simple, brutal truth of who inherited the empire and who was left with just $1. My journey began in 1972 when I arrived in California from Taiwan. All I carried was $200 sewn into the lining of my coat and a recipe for beef noodle soup, a legacy from my grandmother. I was 23 years old, spoke very little English, and was overwhelmed by a new country. My husband, Henry, had arrived a year before me. He worked relentlessly, taking construction jobs during the day and washing dishes at night, determined to save enough to bring me over. When I finally arrived, we lived in a tiny studio apartment above a bustling laundromat in Oakland. The constant, warm smell of detergent and steam is forever linked to those years of relentless hope and constant hunger. In 1978, our life was shattered. Henry suffered a severe injury on a construction site. His back was permanently damaged. Our simple plan, him providing, me raising the children, collapsed instantly. Karen was 4, and Brian was 2. I had to earn money immediately. I found a dilapidated food truck for sale. It was rusted, dented, and coughed smoke like a sick animal. The asking price was $3.00, and I only had $800 for 2 grueling weeks. I showed up at the owner's door every single day, offering my $800. Every day, he refused. On the 15th day, I brought him a container of my grandmother's beef noodle soup. He ate the entire portion standing in his driveway. Without a word, he handed me the keys and said, "Pay me the rest when you can." I never missed a payment. That rusty food truck became my world. I woke up every morning at 4 a.m. to prep ingredients. I served the intense lunch crowds in downtown Oakland, coming home smelling of scallions and chili oil. My hands were constantly cracked and raw from washing dishes in that tiny sink. Henry cared for the children and did whatever light work his back allowed. We weren't a romantic movie couple. We were simply two determined people rowing the same boat through very rough, cold waters. By 1985, my savings were finally enough to open a small, physical restaurant. Just 12 tables, nothing fancy. I named it May's Kitchen, after my grandmother. The struggle continued. The health inspector initially failed me, claiming my English was insufficient to understand the regulations. I didn't hire a translator. I memorized every single code in that book and recited it back to him at the next inspection. The landlord tried to leverage my success by raising the rent by 40% after the first year. I found a young lawyer fresh out of law school who took my case pro bono because she loved my dumplings. Every single thing I built, I fought for. Henry passed away from a heart attack in 2001 at the age of 58. I found him in the garden behind the restaurant, still holding the tomato he had been picking for the lunch special. I didn't close the restaurant that day. I couldn't. The prep was done, the staff was waiting, and Henry would have hated to see the food go to waste. I cooked through the funeral arrangements, the memorial service, the first anniversary, and the 10th. Cooking was my grief. It was my survival. By the time I reached 65, May's Kitchen had expanded into a small empire for successful locations across the Bay Area, a profitable catering company, and even a line of frozen dumplings in local grocery stores. Food and Wine magazine once called me the grandmother of Bay Area Taiwanese cuisine. My accountant estimated my net worth to be around $6 million. My children were oblivious to the cost of this success. Karen assumed her inheritance came from some mysterious life insurance policy or investments Henry had handled. Brian simply thought restaurants operated like magic, spitting out money automatically, like a team Miz that served noodles. They never witnessed the 2 a.m. lease negotiations, the necessary firing of a thieving chef, or the years spent mastering English from cooking shows. They only saw the finished product, the success, never the years of sacrifice. I regret not making them work the grueling lunch rush, scrub the grease traps, or count the receipts at closing time. Instead, I gave them everything I never had: private schools, new cars, and down payments on their houses. I foolishly believed that if I gave them enough material comfort, they would understand the love and the struggle behind it. They did not. They only learned to expect. 3 years ago, I suffered a small stroke. The doctors called it minor, just a warning shot. My speech was slurred for a few weeks, and my right hand trembled. For the first time in 5 decades, I couldn't hold a knife with confidence. Karen immediately suggested I move to an assisted living community, calling it somewhere nice, with activities. I told her I would rather die in my own kitchen. Brian quickly agreed with his sister, claiming he was worried about my stress and my being alone. What he deliberately failed to mention was that he had been secretly researching the property values of my restaurant locations. I found the printouts in his car when I borrowed it for a doctor's appointment. Detailed appraisals for all 4 locations with a note in his handwriting: prime real estate. If we convert to condos. I took photos of the documents and continued with my appointment, but I said nothing. My silence was a calculated choice. After that discovery, I started documenting their behavior. Karen began subtly suggesting I sign power of attorney just in case. Derek casually mentioned estate planning at every family dinner. Brian's wife, Melissa, started tagging me in articles about senior living options on Facebook. They were circling, slowly, patiently, like vultures, waiting for my life to stop breathing. The stroke had signaled my weakness. The restaurants had confirmed my wealth. And my loving, foolish silence had convinced them I would never fight back. I started keeping meticulous records of everything, every conversation, every suggestion about my health, my age, and my mental sharpness was written down in a notebook I kept locked in my bedside drawer. The dinner party where they planned to divide everything was Karen's idea, framed as a family meeting to discuss your future, Mom. I agreed and even offered to cook. They were unaware that I could still hear every word perfectly well from the kitchen. They also didn't know that after the stroke, I had installed a small, inconspicuous camera above the refrigerator, just to make sure I wasn't forgetting to turn off the stove. I was watching and recording the moment Karen delivered her cold line. Mom's not using her brain anymore. After I threw them out that night, I sat in my kitchen, the uneaten food and full wine glasses serving as stark reminders. They're trying to bury me, I whispered to the empty chair where Henry used to sit. But I'm not done yet. The next morning, I contacted my team, my accountant, my lawyer, and Patricia, an expert in elder law. I need to rewrite my will, I informed Patricia, and I need it to be completely unbreakable. For the next 2 weeks, I worked quietly and diligently. I had my mental competency evaluated by 3 different physicians, all of whom signed statements confirming I was of sound mind. I audited my assets and business holdings, documenting every recent decision. The new will was the major twist they never saw coming. My 4 restaurants and the entire business were placed in an irrevocable trust. The trust was specifically designed to benefit my loyal employees, the people who had worked beside me for years, who covered shifts without complaint, and who remembered Henry's birthday. Maria, my prep cook of 15 years. David, who rose from busboy to manager, and Jenny, whose mother's cancer treatment was paid for because I had insisted on good health insurance for the staff. These were the people who would inherit my legacy. I left Karen and Brian each $1. This single dollar was enough to prevent them from claiming I had forgotten them, but clear enough to make an undeniable statement. My house was left to my granddaughter, Sophie. She was 19, Brian's daughter, and the only one who still called me every Sunday. The only one who showed genuine interest in learning the recipes and the business. She was the last ember of something good in the family. Finally, I established the Machen Foundation for Immigrant Women in Food Service, using the rest of my personal assets to fund scholarships, small business loans, and legal assistance. Everything I had to fight for alone when I was 23. The money would go to women like me. After the unbreakable will was signed and filed, I waited. People who smell money always come back. It took 2 weeks. Karen showed up first, alone, bringing lilies, the one flower she knew I disliked. Mom, she said, her voice syrupy with false concern. I wanted to apologize for what I said. We were just worried about you. Worried about what? I asked directly. Your health. The stress of the business, she stammered. I can still outcook anyone in my kitchen, including you, I countered. Karen flinched. She left with a veiled threat. We'll see. A week later, I received the expected letter, certified mail from a law firm, requesting a competency evaluation. Brian was listed as the concerned party. They used phrases like cognitive decline, undue influence, and protection of family assets. They wanted a court to declare me incompetent and seize control of my estate. They filed a petition. Patricia confirmed. They're using your avoidance of them as evidence that something is wrong. The court date was set for November. I walked into the cold courthouse with my cane, my lawyer, and the quiet certainty of a woman who had survived far worse than her own children. Karen, Brian, Derek, and Melissa were already seated. A united front of people who had never built anything, now attempting to dismantle what I had spent 50 years constructing. The judge, a serious woman with silver hair, reviewed the petition and Patricia's response, then examined the stack of medical evaluations, the employee statements, and the documentation of my recent business decisions. She looked at my children. "I've reviewed the evidence," she stated firmly. "I see no indication of cognitive decline. The medical record includes 3 independent competency evaluations conducted within the past 60 days. She continued, turning her gaze directly to Karen and Brian. The court also notes that the petitioners have a significant financial interest in the outcome of this case. The court does not look kindly on attempts to weaponize mental health claims for inheritance purposes." She turned to me. "Mrs. Chen, do you have anything you'd like to say?" I stood up slowly. My voice was clear and steady. "Your Honor, I came to this country with $200 and a recipe. I built a business from a broken food truck. I raised 2 children who never had to worry about their next meal. And now those same children are sitting in this courtroom trying to take everything I built because they've decided I'm too old to matter anymore." I looked at Karen and Brian, but they wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm not confused. I'm not manipulated. I'm just disappointed. They thought because I was quiet, I was weak. They thought because I gave them everything, I owed them more. But I don't." The judge delivered her verdict. "The petition is denied. Case dismissed." Outside the courthouse, I stopped at the bottom of the steps. Karen and Brian were standing at the top, watching. I thought about saying a final word, but the bridge was already burned. They had shown me who they were. I had shown them who I was. Sophie ran up to me by the car, wrapping me in a hug. "Grandma, are you okay?" "I'm perfect," I said. "Let's go get dumplings." We drove to the original restaurant. The staff, knowing the outcome, didn't need to ask. Maria had made my grandmother's beef noodle soup. I gathered them all and told them the truth. "You are all in the will, the business. The whole thing goes to a trust that takes care of you." I told them, "I don't want thank yous. I want you to keep cooking. I want you to keep this place alive. And when I'm gone, I want you to teach someone else the way I taught you." 6 months later, I still come to the restaurant every day, mostly just to sit at the corner table where Henry and I used to share meals. Karen hasn't spoken to me. Brian sent one text. "I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. I was. Sophie comes every weekend now. She's learning to make the soup. Her technique is rough, but she has patience, the willingness to do something badly until you can do it well. "Grandma, do you ever regret cutting them out?" she asked me last Sunday. "I regret that they made it necessary," I said, "but I don't regret protecting what matters." Was May right to leave her children only $1? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Hit subscribe and the bell for more powerful true stories. The final lesson I leave you with is this. If you're listening to this and you've ever been told you're too old, too slow, too quiet to matter, remember this. Your silence is not consent. Your kindness is not weakness. And your story isn't over until you say it is. Don't let anyone write your ending for you. Pick up the pen. Pick up the knife. Pick up whatever tool you have and keep building. They will remember you then, not as an asset, not as an inheritance, but as the woman who refused to disappear.